The red alert sirens echoed through the corridors of Earth's defense. Station Armstrong as Admiral Jacob Hayes rushed toward the command center. His boots hammered against the metal floor while officers scrambled to their positions around him. Something big was happening, and nobody had warned him about any scheduled drills today. The massive orbital platform hung in space above Mars and served as humanity's primary defensive command post for the outer solar system. Jacob had commanded this station for 3 years, and he had never seen his crew move with this kind of urgency before. He burst through the command center doors and immediately locked eyes with Captain Lisa Morgan. She stood at the communications console with her face pale and her hands gripping the edge of the station. Lisa was the best intelligence officer Jacob had ever worked with, and nothing rattled her. Whatever had come through on that transmission was serious enough to shake even her iron composure. "Port," Jacob ordered as he strode to the central command platform. Lisa touched a control and a massive, holographic display materialized in the center of the room. The image showed a creature that looked like it had been designed by nightmares and committee meetings. It stood upright on 4 legs with a torso that split into 2 separate arm structures. Its head was elongated with multiple eye clusters that glowed with an unsettling purple light. The creature wore elaborate armor that seemed to be made from some kind of crystalline metal. Its transmission came through the Deep Space Relay Network approximately 40 minutes ago, Lisa said, and her voice was steady but tight. It's addressed to all of Earth's governments and military commands simultaneously. The sender identifies himself as Ambassador Drexler of the Velcrin Empire, and he claims to speak for something called the Galactic Council. Jacob felt his stomach tighten. Humanity had known for decades that other intelligent species existed in the galaxy. They had picked up scattered radio signals and detected signs of advanced civilizations in distant star systems. But actual contact had never happened. Earth's exploration fleets had been careful to avoid drawing attention. While they quietly expanded into unclaimed space and built colonies on dozens of worlds, the plan had always been to grow strong before announcing their presence to the wider galaxy. Apparently that plan had just fallen apart. "Play it," Jacob said. The holographic figure of Ambassador Drexler began to speak. Its voice was deep and resonant, and the translation software rendered it in perfect English with an accent that somehow managed to sound condescending in any language. "Greetings to the species that calls itself humanity. I am Ambassador Drexler, and I represent the Galactic Council. For 3,000 cycles, we have governed this galaxy and maintained order among the civilized species. Your kind has come to our attention due to your aggressive expansion into territories that fall under Council jurisdiction. We have observed your colonies spreading like an infection across 73 worlds that belong to the galactic community by ancient right." Jacob felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. Ancient right. These aliens had probably never even visited those worlds, and now they claimed ownership just because humanity had gotten there first. The ambassador continued with its speech, and each word dripped with arrogance. "The Council has deliberated on this matter, and we have reached a decision regarding your species. You will immediately surrender 30% of your military vessels to Council authority. You will provide tribute of rare earth minerals and exotic matter sufficient to supply our industrial needs for the next decade. You will accept the permanent placement of Council oversight administrators who will monitor and regulate all future human expansion and development." Lisa made a small sound of disbelief beside him. Several other officers in the command center had stopped what they were doing to stare at the holographic display. The demands were absurd and insulting, and clearly designed to reduce humanity to a vassal state. "These terms are not negotiable," Ambassador Drexler said, and now its tone carried a clear threat. "You have 72 Earth hours to signal your compliance and begin implementing these requirements. Should you refuse, then the Council will deploy our combined armada to enforce these terms through military action. I remind you that the Council has governed this galaxy for millennia without challenge. 17 species have attempted to resist our authority throughout history, and 17 species have been brought to heel. Do not make the mistake of believing yourselves exceptional." The transmission ended, and the holographic figure dissolved into particles of light. The command center fell silent, except for the steady hum of computers and life support systems. Jacob looked around at his officers and saw confusion mixed with anger on every face. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. "They're serious," Lisa finally said. "Our analysis of the transmission shows it was sent from a massive structure. Approximately 40 light-years from Earth. The energy signature matches nothing in our current databases, but the technology appears genuine. These people have faster-than-light communication at the very least." Jacob nodded slowly, and his mind was already racing through possibilities. "What do we know about this combined armada they mentioned?" Lisa pulled up another display and showed a series of intelligence reports that Earth's scout ships had gathered over the past few decades. Not much that's current. Our probes have detected large concentrations of warships in several sectors controlled by various alien species. Based on old intercepts and observations, we estimated their largest fleet groupings at somewhere between 300 and 600 capital-class vessels. Their technology appeared roughly equivalent to our fusion drive era from about 50 years ago. Jacob repeated and caught the key word. "You think they're more advanced than we estimated?" "Or less," Lisa said, with a slight smile. "Sir, these aliens have been watching us, but they clearly haven't been watching very carefully. They think we have colonies on 73 worlds. The actual number is 147. They think our expansion started 50 years ago when we actually began colonizing in earnest almost 2 centuries back. Either their intelligence gathering is terrible, or we've been better at hiding our activities than we thought." Jacob felt a cold smile forming on his lips. This changed things considerably. He pulled up his command interface and opened a secure channel to Earth. "Get me General Paul Carter at Unified Defense Command. Also patch in Commander Nicole Brooks from Naval Intelligence and have Dr. Henry Kim standing by from the Civilian Oversight Committee." Full encryption on all channels. The next 20 minutes were a flurry of secure communications and rapid briefings. General Carter appeared on screen from somewhere deep inside the Rocky Mountain Command Complex, and his weathered face showed the same mixture of anger and calculation that Jacob felt. Commander Brooks joined from her intelligence ship in the asteroid belt, and Dr. Kim connected from Geneva, where the civilian government was already in emergency session. "They have no idea what they're threatening," General Carter said after reviewing the transmission. "Our projections showed that we'd need at least another decade before we were ready for contact with established galactic powers. But if their intelligence is this far out of date, then maybe we're already more ready than we thought." Dr. Kim spoke up from his feed, and his academic manner was at odds with the seriousness of the situation. "The diplomatic implications are significant. If we refuse these demands, we'll be declaring ourselves hostile to the entire galactic order. But if we accept even partially, we'll be legitimizing their authority over us. There's no middle ground here." "And we don't look for middle ground," Jacob said quietly. "We've spent 200 years preparing for this scenario. Every war game we've run and every tactical simulation has been built around the assumption that we'd eventually face a technologically superior force that underestimated us. Maybe that day is today." Commander Brooks leaned forward on her screen. "Sir, are you suggesting we refuse the ultimatum?" "I'm suggesting we respond appropriately," Jacob said. He began typing a brief message into his console. "These aliens think they can threaten us into submission with displays of ancient authority and vague military threats. They're treating us like children who need to be taught their place in the galactic hierarchy. I think we should show them exactly where humanity's place is." He finished typing and reviewed the message. It was short and simple, and it would either mark the beginning of humanity's emergence as a galactic power or start a war that could end their species. Jacob looked at the faces on his screens and saw determination staring back at him. "This is what I'm sending unless someone has objections," Jacob said. He displayed the message for everyone to see. It contained only 4 words, followed by humanity's official first contact diplomatic seal. "Is that all?" General Carter started to laugh, and it was a rough sound with no humor in it. "That's going to make them very angry, Admiral," good Jacob replied. "Let them come angry and overconfident. We've been ready for this fight longer than they've been paying attention." He looked at each of his command staff in turn. "Execute Protocol Omega. Full mobilization of all defensive assets. Activate the Ghost Fleet and bring every hidden installation online. If they want a war, then we'll show them what humanity does best." He pressed the send button, and the message began its journey across the stars toward the Galactic Council. Somewhere 40 light-years away, a group of aliens was about to receive the shock of their very long lives. The countdown had begun. The Sovereign Nexus was the largest artificial structure in the known galaxy, and it hung in the void like a monument to the Council's power. The station measured over 200 kilometers across and housed the diplomatic chambers where 12 species had governed galactic affairs for longer than human civilization had existed. Right now, those chambers echoed with angry voices as Ambassador Drexler stood before the assembled Council representatives and tried to explain the inexplicable. They said, "What?" demanded Councillor Vexener of the Hork Collective. His species resembled armored centipedes that stood upright, and his mandibles clicked together in agitation. "Repeat this human response, so that I may be certain I heard correctly." Drexler's sea clusters dimmed with what might have been embarrassment. The humans replied with 4 words. "Is that all?" "Nothing more." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from a dozen species began shouting over each other in their native languages, while translation systems struggled to keep up. Some demanded immediate military action, while others questioned whether the message had been properly understood. In 3,000 years of council history, no species had ever responded to an ultimatum with such casual dismissal. War Magistrate Quellen rose from his seat, and the chamber gradually fell silent. His species, the Jaltar, were legendary warriors who had conquered 40 star systems before joining the council 2 millennia ago. He was massive, even by his species standards, and stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of countless victories. "This response is either profound stupidity, or the humans possess capabilities we have not accounted for," Quellen said calmly. "I recommend we examine our intelligence data before making assumptions." He gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the council floor. It showed star charts marking human territory in red. Our scouts first detected human activity approximately 150 of their years ago. They possessed primitive chemical rockets and had barely established a presence beyond their home world. Subsequent observations showed steady expansion using fusion drive technology and kinetic weapons. Their largest warships mass approximately 500,000 tons and carry nuclear weapons alongside conventional missiles. Quellen pulled up ship schematics that looked decades out of date. "Our most recent intelligence estimates place their defensive fleet at approximately 200,000 capital vessels, supported by perhaps 1,000 smaller craft. Their technology is adequate for a developing species, but presents no challenge to Council forces. A standard enforcement fleet of 500 warships should be more than sufficient to demonstrate our superiority." Observer Lysara of the Luminari stood gracefully from her position. Her species were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to glow with soft bioluminescence. The Luminari were scholars and philosophers who rarely involved themselves in military matters, but their insights had proven valuable many times. Throughout Council history, or Magistrate, I must respectfully question the completeness of our intelligence, Lysara said gently. "My research teams have been monitoring human cultural broadcasts for several decades, and we have observed something unusual. Humans appear obsessed with warfare in ways that exceed normal species development." She activated her own display and showed images pulled from human entertainment networks. They create elaborate simulations of combat that they engage with for recreation. They produce countless stories and visual narratives depicting wars against aliens and monsters and each other. They study historical conflicts with an intensity that other species reserve for art or science. Their children play games that teach tactical thinking and resource management in military contexts. "Entertainment means nothing," Drexler interrupted dismissively. "Many species create fantasies about war. It does not translate to actual capability," perhaps Lysara acknowledged. "But I find it curious that a species would dedicate so much cultural effort to warfare unless they had particular aptitude for it. There is also another consideration. In all our observations, we have never seen a human fleet engagement. We have never witnessed their actual combat doctrine in practice, We are making assumptions based on technical specifications rather than demonstrated capability. Quellen considered this for a moment before responding. Your concerns are noted, Observer, but they do not change our strategic assessment. Even if the humans are more militarily competent than expected, they cannot overcome our numerical and technological advantages. The Council has existed for 3,000 years. We have defeated every species that has challenged our authority. The humans will be no different. The vote was called, and the Council authorized military action by overwhelming majority. Only Lasara and 2 other representatives abstained. Within hours, orders went out across Council space, and the combined armada began assembling. For its journey to human territory, meanwhile, back in the Sol system, Admiral Jacob Hayes stood in the war room deep inside. Armstrong stationed and watched as humanity's true military strength came online. The massive holographic display showed the entire solar system with thousands of tactical markers appearing as hidden assets activated and revealed themselves. Ghost Fleet reporting full operational status. Captain Lisa Morgan announced from her station. All stealth ships have disengaged their signal dampeners and are moving into assigned positions. Jacob nodded as hundreds of new ship icons appeared on the display. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's secret weapon and represented the cutting edge of their military technology. These vessels had been built in hidden shipyards scattered throughout the asteroid belt and Kuiper belt. They were equipped with technology that the Council's intelligence networks had never detected because humanity had been very careful about what they revealed to watching eyes. How long until the Council fleet arrives? Jacob asked. Based on their most recent transmission bursts, we estimate 6 days, Lisa replied. They're gathering forces from multiple sectors, which is slowing them down. It also tells us they're taking this seriously, enough to assemble a major fleet. General Paul Carter appeared. On the main view screen from Earth, behind him, Jacob could see the massive situation room where Unified Defense Command coordinated all of humanity's military forces. Admiral, we've completed mobilization of ground forces and our orbital defense networks are at full readiness. I have to say it feels strange to finally be using all this hardware we've been building for decades. Strange but necessary, Jacob agreed. What's the status on the Marine Expeditionary Forces? All units are loaded and ready for rapid deployment, Carter said with satisfaction. Major Chris Bennett's teams have been drilling on shipboarding operations for months. They're eager to put their training to use. Commander Nicole Brooks joined the conversation from her command ship somewhere in the outer system. Naval intelligence has finished analyzing the Council's broadcast patterns. We've identified likely jump points where their fleet will enter our space. I'm positioning reconnaissance drones to give us advance warning. Good work, everyone, Jacob said. Now comes the hard part, which is waiting. The Council thinks they're dealing with primitives who stumbled into space recently. They have no idea that we've been preparing for this scenario since before most of their intelligence analysts were born. He pulled up a classified file that showed humanity's actual expansion timeline. While the Council thought humans had been in space for 150 years, the truth was closer to 400. Earth had deliberately fed false information. 2 alien scout ships by broadcasting outdated technology specifications and hiding their newer colonies behind elaborate deception. Networks. Every human ship captain had spent years training in combat simulators that pitted them against theoretical alien fleets. They had studied every scrap of intelligence about Council tactics and weapons systems. They had run thousands of war games exploring every possible scenario from defensive stands to offensive strikes. When the Council arrived, they would be facing an enemy that had fought them countless times before, even if only in simulation. Lisa, pull up the analysis of their weapons technology. Jacob ordered. The holographic display shifted to show detailed breakdowns of Council military hardware based on intelligence gathered over decades. Their energy weapons are powerful, but they operate on predictable frequencies. Our plasma shield systems should be able to deflect or absorb most of their firepower. Their missiles use conventional guidance systems that our point defense networks can handle. Their armor is strong but vulnerable to concentrated antimatter warheads. What about their numbers? Jacob asked. That's their main advantage, Lisa admitted. If they bring 500 ships like Quellen suggested, then we'll be outnumbered roughly 2-1. But our ships are newer, and our crews are better trained. More importantly, we'll have the element of surprise. They expect to face scattered defenses and panicked resistance. Instead, they're going to encounter a coordinated military force that knows exactly what it's doing. Jacob studied the tactical projections for a long moment. Everything depended on those first few minutes of contact. If humanity could demonstrate overwhelming superiority immediately, then the Council might reconsider their position. If the battle dragged into a prolonged engagement, then numbers might eventually tell against them. Make sure every ship commander understands the rules of engagement, Jacob said firmly. We hit them hard and fast. We target military vessels only, and we offer rescue to any survivors. We're not trying to commit genocide here. We're teaching these aliens that humanity cannot be bullied or conquered. Understood, sir, Lisa replied. The next 6 days passed with agonizing slowness as both sides prepared for conflict. Council ships gathered at staging points throughout their territory while human forces moved silently into ambush positions. Diplomatic channels remained open, but neither side showed any willingness to back down. The Council demanded submission and humanity. It demanded respect as equals. On the 6th day, long-range sensors detected the Council fleet entering the outer solar system near Neptune's orbit. 512 warships arranged in traditional Council battle formations. They broadcast a final demand for surrender as they began their approach toward. Earth Admiral Jacob Hayes stood on the command deck of Armstrong Station and watched the enemy fleet advance. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, making final preparations. In hidden positions throughout the system, hundreds of human warships waited for his order to engage. Send them our response, Jacob said quietly. Captain Lisa Morgan activated the transmission system. The message was simple and direct. We're still waiting. For the war you threatened, the battle for. Earth was about to begin. War Magistrate Quellen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Justice, and watched the human star system grow larger on his tactical displays. His fleet of 512 warships moved in perfect formation through the outer reaches of what the humans called their solar system. The formation was ancient and proven over countless battles, and it had never failed the Council before. Today would be no different. All ships report ready status, his tactical officer announced. We are approaching optimal firing range for the first bombardment wave. Quellen nodded slowly and studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. Something felt wrong about this entire situation. His scouts had detected only minimal human activity since they entered the system. A few scattered patrol craft had fled before them, and the handful of defensive platforms near the outer planets had gone dark without firing a shot. It was almost too easy. Broadcast final surrender demand, Quellen ordered. Give these humans one last chance to see reason before we destroy their defenses. The transmission went out across all frequencies, but only silence came back. Quellen's mandibles clicked together in irritation. Such arrogance from primitives who should be trembling before the might of the Council. Very well then. They would learn through pain what words could not teach them. All ships prepare to engage, Quellen commanded. Target the defensive platforms first, then move toward their inner colonies. I want this over before their sun sets. His weapons officer began coordinating targeting solutions with the fleet, when suddenly, every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. The tactical display exploded with new contacts as ships appeared out of nowhere surrounding the Council fleet on all sides. Hundreds of vessels materialized from what should have been empty space, and their weapons were already charging for firing solutions. Stealth fleet, someone shouted in panic. They have a stealth fleet, and we're in the middle of it. Quellen barely had time to process this impossible information before the human ships opened fire. Missiles streaked across the void, moving faster than anything he had seen before. They punched through his fleet's formation and struck with devastating precision. 3 Council ships exploded in the first volley before their shields could even activate. 5 more went dark as their power systems failed from some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon. Turned fire. Quellen roared. All ships engage at will. The Council fleet tried to respond, but they were already at a massive disadvantage. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly for this ambush, and now they executed their attack with terrifying coordination. Every human ship seemed to know exactly where it needed to be and what target it should engage. Their formations flowed like water around the more rigid Council battle lines. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the EU's Defiant from her position at the heart of the human formation. Her ship was one of the new Ghost Fleet vessels, and it represented everything humanity had learned about warfare in the past 2 centuries. Right now, she was putting all that knowledge to devastating use. "Target the heavy cruiser on our port side," Lisa ordered calmly. "Fire Solution Alpha 3 on my mark." Her weapons officer entered the commands with practiced efficiency. Around them, the Defiant's combat AI was processing thousands of tactical decisions per second and feeding optimal firing solutions to the crew. This was humanity's secret advantage. While Council ships relied on biological crews with normal reaction times, human vessels had learned to merge artificial intelligence with human judgment to create something far more effective. Lisa said, 6 antimatter missiles launched from the Defiant's tubes and accelerated toward their target. The Council cruiser tried to evade, but human targeting systems had already calculated every possible escape vector. The missiles adjusted course with impossible precision and struck the cruiser's shield generators directly. The shields collapsed, and 2 follow-up shots from the Defiant's plasma cannons tore through the exposed hole. The cruiser began tumbling away, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Next target acquired," her tactical officer reported. "Council destroyer attempting to flank our formation." "Show them why that's a bad idea," Lisa replied with a cold smile. Throughout the battlefield, human forces were systematically dismantling the Council fleet. What Quellen had expected to be an easy victory had turned into a nightmare of coordination and firepower. Human fighters swarmed through his formations, piloted by men and women who pulled maneuvers that should have killed them from the acceleration forces alone. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw led his squadron through a gap in the Council lines, and his pilots destroyed 3 support ships before the enemy could react. "They're too fast," one of Quellen's officers reported with barely controlled fear. "Our targeting systems can't track their fighters properly, and our point defense is only intercepting 30% of their missiles." Quellen watched another 2 of his ships die on the tactical display. The humans weren't just winning. They were dominating this battle with a level of military precision that spoke of generations of preparation. Every attack was coordinated perfectly. Every defense was exactly where it needed to be. These weren't primitives stumbling through their first real space battle. These were veterans executing a plan they had practiced 1,000 times. "Deploy boarding countermeasures on all ships," Quellen ordered. "And increase power to aft shields. We need to create an opening for retreat." But the humans had anticipated even this. Commander Nicole Brooks watched from her command ship as Council vessels tried to regroup. She had positioned 3 strike groups specifically to cut off any retreat attempts, and now she gave the order to close the trap. "All units execute containment protocol," Nicole transmitted. "Don't let any of them slip through." Human warships moved to block the Council fleet's escape routes, while continuing to pour devastating fire into their formation. More Council ships died or went dark with every passing minute. Quellen realized with growing horror that he wasn't just losing this battle. He was losing it badly enough that his fleet might not survive at all. Then something even more unexpected happened. Several Council ships suddenly lost power and began broadcasting distress signals. Quellen's sensors showed human craft attaching to their hulls, but no weapons fire. What were they doing? Major Chris Bennett led his Marine boarding team through the breach in the Council destroyer's hull. His men moved with practiced efficiency, wearing powered armor that made them nearly unstoppable in close-quarters combat. They had trained for this exact scenario dozens of times, and now muscle memory took over. where I went off to solve some of mine, why often or when it why I reg. Non-lethal force only. We want prisoners and intelligence. His team swept through the destroyer using stun weapons that dropped the council crew without killing them. The aliens were disoriented and unprepared for boarding actions. Most surrendered without significant resistance once they realized the humans weren't there to massacre them. Within 20 minutes, Chris stood on the bridge of a captured council warship, and his tech specialists were already downloading data from the ship's computers. "Command, this is Bennett." Chris transmitted back to Admiral Hayes. "Target secured. We have prisoners, and we're accessing their database now. You're going to want to see what we're finding." Back on the Eternal Justice, Quellen made the hardest decision of his long military career. His fleet had lost over 200 ships in less than 6 hours of combat. The humans showed no signs of slowing down, and his remaining forces were demoralized and scattered. If he continued this engagement, he would lose everything. "All ships prepare for emergency jump," Quellen ordered, and his voice was heavy with defeat. "We are withdrawing from human space." His officers moved to execute the order with obvious relief. Around them, the surviving council warships began charging their faster-than-light drives. The humans could have pressed their advantage and destroyed the retreating fleet, but Admiral Hayes gave orders to let them go. He had made his point clearly enough, as the council fleet began jumping away in ones and twos. Captain Lisa Morgan received new orders from command. "All ships stand down from combat alert, but maintain readiness. This is not over yet." She looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of dozens of council ships floating in the void. Human casualties had been remarkably light. 3 ships destroyed and maybe 24 fighters lost. Against an enemy fleet that outnumbered them, the humans had achieved a victory so one-sided that it would have seemed impossible just hours before. Status report. Lisa ordered her crew. "All systems nominal," her engineering officer reported. "Minor damage to forward shields, but nothing that will keep us out of action. Ammunition stores at 70%. We're ready to go again, if needed." Lisa allowed herself a small smile. Around her, the bridge crew was exhausted but triumphant. They had just fought in humanity's first major space battle against alien forces, and they had won decisively. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this defeat easily, and humanity had just announced their presence. To the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, Admiral Jacob Hayes transmitted a message to the fleeing Council fleet. His words were calm and measured, but they carried an unmistakable challenge. "Yes. We're still waiting for the war you threatened." Council had come to human space expecting to crush primitives and teach them their place in the galactic order. Instead, they had encountered a species that had spent centuries preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. A species that understood warfare at a fundamental level, because they had been fighting among themselves since before they discovered fire. A species that had finally unified and turned all that hard-won knowledge outward toward the stars. War Magistrate. Quellen sat alone in his quarters aboard the Eternal Justice as his ship jumped away from the battle. He stared at the tactical recordings of the engagement and tried to understand what had just happened. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had never lost a major fleet engagement. And now a species they had dismissed as primitives had handed them a crushing defeat. He replayed the footage of human ships, moving through his formation with deadly grace. He watched their fighters execute maneuvers that should have been impossible. He studied their coordination and realized, with growing dread, that humanity had approached warfare as a science to be mastered rather than just a necessary evil. The galaxy was about to change in ways the Council could never have anticipated. Humanity had arrived, and they had announced themselves with fire and blood, an overwhelming victory. Quellen knew that when he returned to the Sovereign Nexus, he would have to deliver the most devastating report in Council history. They had awakened something. They did not understand, and now everyone would have to deal with the consequences. The Sovereign Nexus Council. Chambers felt colder than usual as Ambassador Drexler watched the surviving members of the combined Armada file into the observation gallery. These officers had limped back to Council space with barely half their original fleet, and their faces showed the kind of shock that came from experiencing the impossible. War Magistrate Quellen stood at the center podium, waiting to deliver his report, and even his legendary composure seemed shaken. "The Council recognizes War Magistrate Quellen," the Session Arbiter announced formally. "You may present your tactical analysis of the engagement with human forces." Quellen activated the holographic display, and the entire chamber fell silent as footage from the battle began playing. Council representatives from 12 species watched in growing horror. Human ships appeared from nowhere and tore through their fleet with devastating efficiency. The recordings showed missiles that moved faster than Council point defense could track. They showed fighters pulling maneuvers that should have liquefied their pilots. They showed coordination between hundreds of ships that operated like a single unified organism. "We were outmatched in every meaningful category," Quillen said, and his voice carried no trace of his usual confidence. "Human weapons technology exceeds our own by what I estimate to be 50 to 70 years of development. Their defensive systems rendered most of our weaponry ineffective. Their tactical coordination suggests command and control capabilities far beyond what we believed possible for their level of advancement." Counselor Vexener of the Hort Collective rose angrily from his seat. "Impossible. Our intelligence clearly indicated that humans were barely past their fusion drive development stage. How could our assessments be so catastrophically wrong?" Observer Lasara stood gracefully, and her luminescent skin pulsed with what might have been sadness. "If I may address the Council, I believe I can explain what happened. My research teams have been conducting deeper analysis of human culture and history, and what we have discovered is deeply troubling." She activated her own display, and images of Earth appeared showing cities and factories and massive orbital construction platforms. Humans did not stumble into space exploration recently as we believed. Our intelligence was fed deliberately false information. The truth is that humanity has been expanding into space for over 400 of their years. They have colonies on 147 worlds, not the 73 we detected. They have been building their military forces in secret shipyards hidden throughout their asteroid fields and outer system regions. More images appeared showing human military training facilities and combat simulators. But the deception goes even deeper than simple misdirection. Humans have spent their entire civilization perfecting the art of warfare. Before they achieved spaceflight, they spent 10,000 years fighting amongst themselves in conflicts that killed billions of their own kind. They study warfare the way we study philosophy or mathematics. Every human military officer spends years training in simulation environments that pit them against theoretical enemy forces. Lasara pulled up footage from human entertainment networks showing war games and strategy simulations. They practice combat constantly. Their children grow up playing games that teach tactical thinking and resource management. Their entertainment industry produces countless scenarios of warfare against aliens and monsters. When we arrived to threaten them, they had already fought us 1,000 times in their simulations. They knew our tactics before we ever engaged because they had studied every scrap of intelligence about us for decades. Council chamber erupted in angry voices, but Lasara continued, speaking over the noise. "There is something else the Council must understand. Most of our species achieved peace through cultural evolution or because we were conquered and brought into the fold. Humans achieved peace by defeating every rival faction on their planet and choosing to unify. They are predators by evolution and warriors by culture. We threatened a species that has been preparing for this exact scenario since before most of us were born." Ambassador Drexler slammed his manipulators against his podium. "Then we must respond with overwhelming force. Gather every available warship from across Council space. Deploy our reserve fleets. Show these humans that we will not tolerate such defiance." "And lose how many more ships?" Quellen asked quietly. "I watched 200 vessels die in 6 hours. We accomplished nothing except proving that humans are far more dangerous than we ever imagined. If we send more fleets, we will simply feed more ships into a grinder that we cannot win against." "The War Magistrate is correct," Lasara said firmly. But there is something else the Council needs to know. While we have been discussing military responses, I had my teams analyze the data captured from the battle. Humans targeted our ships with precision that avoided unnecessary casualties. They offered rescue to survivors. They used boarding teams to capture vessels intact rather than destroying everything they encountered. They could have annihilated Quellen's entire fleet, but they chose not to. She let that information settle before continuing. I believe the humans are sending us a message. They can defeat us militarily, but they are not seeking our destruction. They want respect and recognition as equals. Perhaps it is time we considered giving them what they ask. 4. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, Admiral Jacob Hayes stood in the command center reviewing intelligence data that Major Chris Bennett's boarding teams had recovered from captured Council ships. What he was reading changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. "This is remarkable," Captain Lisa Morgan said as she studied the same data. "The Council is not nearly as unified as they pretend to be. At least for member species are unhappy with Velcrin Empire dominance. Several others have been pushing for reforms for decades, but the military faction keeps blocking them." Jacob nodded slowly as he processed the implications. So the Council is not some ancient monolithic power structure. It's a political alliance held together by tradition and the threat of military force. And we just proved their military force is not as overwhelming as everyone believed. General Paul Carter appeared on the communication screen looking thoughtful. "This creates opportunities. If we can reach out to the reform faction within the Council, we might be able to split their coalition. Not everyone wants war with us, and now we've given the peace advocates ammunition to argue with. We need to move carefully, though," Commander Nicole Brooks warned. "We've won one battle, but the Council still has thousands of ships spread across their territory. If they commit fully to a war of attrition, they could wear us down eventually. We make sure they don't commit fully," Jacob said. "We need to demonstrate strength while offering a path to peace. Show them we're too dangerous to fight, but reasonable enough to negotiate with." Dr. Henry Kim joined the conversation from Geneva, where the civilian government was in constant session. "The Diplomatic Corps is drafting proposals for a new relationship with the Council. We're calling it the Reformed Galactic Assembly. The basic premise is that we replace the Council's hierarchical structure with something more democratic, where all species have equal representation." "That's ambitious," Jacob said with raised eyebrows. "You think the Council will accept such fundamental changes?" "They will if enough of their member species demand it," Henry replied. "Observer Lasara has been sending us back-channel communications. She represents a significant faction within the Council that wants reform. Our victory gave them the political opening they needed. If we play this correctly, we can transform the entire galactic order." Jacob considered the possibilities. Humanity had prepared for war, but perhaps they had an opportunity for something better. Something that would benefit not just Earth, but every species tired of living under Council domination. "All right," Jacob said finally. "Here's what we do. We position our fleet for a counterstrike into Council territory, but we target military installations only. We prove we can hit them anywhere we choose. At the same time, we open diplomatic channels with the Reform faction and present our proposal for the Reformed Galactic Assembly. We show strength and offer partnerships simultaneously." Over the next several days, humanity executed this strategy with precision. Admiral Hayes led a strike force across the border into Council space. They hit 3 major military staging areas, destroying weapon platforms and supply depots, but carefully avoiding civilian casualties. Each strike was accompanied by broadcasts explaining humanity's position. They wanted peace and equality. They would accept nothing less. The strikes had their intended effect. Across Council territory, species began questioning why they were fighting humans at all. The Luminari openly supported reform efforts. The Hort Collective remained neutral rather than backing the hardliners. Even some Velcrin commanders began questioning their government's aggressive stance. Ambassador Drexer found his support eroding with each passing day. War Magistrate Quellen refused to lead another fleet against human forces, and several other military commanders followed his example. The Council's unity was fracturing under the pressure of military defeat and internal dissent. Observer Lysera seized the moment to call for a special vote. She presented humanity's proposal for the reformed Galactic Assembly directly to the full council. The vote would determine whether the galaxy continued down a path of conflict or embraced fundamental change. Captain Lisa Morgan monitored the proceedings from her ship position, just outside council space. The vote was close, with hardliners fighting desperately to maintain the old order. But species after species voted for reform, driven by the realization that the galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven that the council was not invincible, and that opened possibilities that had been unthinkable. Just weeks before, the final vote came down to a single representative. Councillor Vexener of the Hort Collective had remained silent throughout the debate. Now he rose to cast the deciding vote. The chamber fell silent as he considered his choice. For 3,000 years, the council has governed through strength and intimidation, Vexener said slowly. The humans have shown us that this model no longer works, if it ever truly did. Perhaps it is time we tried something different. I vote in favor of reform. The chamber erupted in chaos as the old order crumbled, and something new began to take its place. Ambassador Drexler stormed out in fury, but he no longer had the votes to stop what was happening. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for millennia, was dissolving to be replaced by something humanity had introduced to the stars: democracy and equality between species, regardless of their military power or historical dominance. Admiral Jacob Hayes received the news with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had come to the galaxy expecting to fight for their independence. Instead, they had sparked a revolution that would change everything. The war was over before it truly began, and both sides had won something better than victory. 6 months had passed since. The vote that transformed the Galactic Council into the reformed Galactic Assembly, and the changes were already reshaping how the galaxy functioned. Captain Lisa Morgan stood in the Grand Assembly Hall aboard the Sovereign, next as watching representatives from dozens of species take their seats for the inaugural session. The old hierarchical chamber had been redesigned, with equal seating for all member species, and humans now sat among them as full partners rather than subjects. She wore her dress uniform with quiet pride, knowing that her actions during the battle had helped make this moment possible. Around her, delegates spoke in a dozen languages, while translation systems rendered their words into formats everyone could understand. The atmosphere was tense with possibility. As species that had lived under council domination for centuries prepared to participate in genuine democratic governance for the first time. Observer Lysera approached Lisa with her luminescent skin glowing softly in the chamber lighting. The Luminari diplomat had become humanity's strongest ally in the reform movement, and Lisa had grown to respect her wisdom greatly. Over the past months, your people have done something remarkable, Lysera said gently. In a matter of weeks, you accomplished what reformers like myself have been attempting for generations. You proved that the old order was not invincible, and that gave everyone else the courage to demand change. We just wanted to be treated as equals, Lisa replied. The fact that it sparked a larger movement was unexpected but welcome. Though I think you give us too much credit. Your faction did most of the political work. We just provided the catalyst. Lysera's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. You are too modest. Humans have a gift for understanding power dynamics and using them effectively. That same quality that makes you excellent warriors also makes you skilled diplomats when you choose to be. Session was called to order, and Admiral Jacob Hayes took his place as Earth's primary representative. He had retired from active military command to take on this diplomatic role, and he brought the same strategic thinking to politics that had served him so well in battle. General Paul Carter now commanded humanity's military forces, while Jacob worked to ensure the peace they had won would last. The first order of business was establishing the new assembly charter. Unlike the old council, where the Velcrin Empire and a few other powerful species dominated decision-making, the reformed assembly gave equal voting rights to all members. Regardless of their size or military strength, it was a radical departure from thousands of years of tradition, and many of the older species struggled with the concept. Ambassador Drexler was notably absent from the proceedings. The Velcrin Empire had withdrawn from galactic affairs after their authority collapsed, and they now focused on internal matters. War Magistrate Quellen, however, had embraced the changes with surprising enthusiasm. He sat in the military advisory section, looking more relaxed than Lisa had ever seen him. The assembly spent hours debating various proposals and treaties. Some discussions became heated as species aired grievances that had been suppressed for centuries. But the overall tone was constructive as everyone worked toward building something better than what had existed before. Jacob Hayes contributed to several key debates, and his practical approach to problem-solving earned respect from delegates across the spectrum. During a recess, Lisa found herself talking with Commander Nicole Brooks, who had traveled from Earth to observe the proceedings. Nicole had taken over much of the intelligence operations that kept humanity informed about galactic developments, and her insights had proven invaluable. During the transition period, it's strange seeing former enemies working together like this, Nicole said quietly. 3 months ago, Quellen was trying to destroy our fleet. Now he's advising us on joint defense initiatives. People can change when circumstances demand it, Lisa replied. Quellen is a warrior, but he's also pragmatic. He recognizes that the galaxy is safer with cooperation than conflict. Plus, I think he respects us for beating him so thoroughly. Warriors understand strength. Nicole smiled slightly. Speaking of which, have you heard about the Joint Defense Initiative? They want human instructors to train pilots from other species. Apparently everyone wants to learn how we fight so effectively. I heard Lieutenant Kevin Shaw and Lieutenant Amy Price both volunteered for that project. Lisa said. They'll be good at it. Both of them understand that teaching is about more than just technique. It's about mindset. The afternoon session focused on territorial disputes and resource allocation. This was where the old council system had failed most dramatically, with powerful species claiming vast regions of space, while smaller civilizations were restricted to limited areas. The reformed assembly proposed a new framework based on actual usage and development rather than ancient claims. Dr. Henry Kim presented humanity's position during this debate. He argued eloquently for a system that rewarded active colonization and resource development while protecting the rights of species still developing their space capabilities. His proposal found support from many smaller species who had suffered under the old arbitrary boundaries. The debate stretched into evening as delegates hammered out compromises and framework agreements. Lisa watched the process with fascination. This was humanity's other great strength beyond warfare. They understood how to build systems that balanced competing interests and created stability through mutual benefit rather than imposed authority. As the session finally concluded, Jacob Hayes stood to deliver closing remarks. His voice carried through the chamber with quiet authority. 6 months ago, my species received an ultimatum demanding our submission. We refused because we believe that all intelligent species deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The conflict that followed was regrettable but necessary. Today we stand together not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners, building something new. The Reformed Galactic Assembly represents a chance for all of us to move beyond the limitations of the past and create a future based on cooperation. Rather than domination, he paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from a dozen different species. Humans have learned through painful experience that we are stronger together than divided. We have fought wars among ourselves that nearly destroyed our world. We know the cost of conflict and the value of peace. We offer our experience and our strength not to rule over others, but to stand beside them as equals. That is what we asked for when we replied to the council's threats, and that is what we will continue to advocate for in this assembly. Chamber erupted in acknowledgement from species that used various methods to show approval. It was a moment that marked humanity's full acceptance into the galactic community, not as junior members, but as influential partners whose voices would shape the future. Later that evening, Lisa stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Sovereign Nexus hung in space, surrounded by ships from dozens of worlds. Human vessels mixed with alien craft in patterns that would have been impossible just months earlier. The galaxy was changing in ways that nobody could have predicted when Ambassador Drexler first delivered his arrogant ultimatum to Earth-warm Magistrate Quellen, found her there and stood silently beside her for a moment before speaking. I have been thinking about that battle we fought, about how thoroughly your forces defeated mine. I have studied the tactical recordings many times, trying to understand how we missed so many signs of your true capabilities. You saw what we wanted you to see, Lisa said without apology. We learned a long time ago that enemies who underestimate you are easier to defeat than enemies who respect you. A wise strategy, Quellen acknowledged, but there is something I do not understand. Your people could have destroyed my entire fleet. You could have pressed your advantage and conquered council space while we were disorganized. Why did you show mercy? Lisa turned to face the massive warrior. Because we've learned another lesson through our history. Victory in battle means nothing if you lose the peace that follows. We didn't want to rule the galaxy. We wanted to change it. That required leaving you alive to help us build something better. Quellen's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. Your species thinks several moves ahead. That is rare among warriors, and even rarer among conquerors. Perhaps this new assembly will succeed where the old council failed. Perhaps Lisa agreed. But it will take work from all of us. Humans didn't come to the galaxy with all the answers. We just asked the right question at the right time. Is that all? Quellen said, and there was definitely amusement in his tone now. Those 3 words changed everything. They were not arrogance, as we first believed. They were a challenge for us to do better, exactly, Lisa said with a smile. We were asking if threats and intimidation were really the best the galaxy could offer. Turned out the answer was no. There were better options waiting if someone was willing to fight for them. She looked back out at the stars and thought about everything that had changed. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw and Lieutenant Amy Price were already working with alien pilots, teaching them human combat techniques. Major Chris Bennett was training joint military units that would defend all assembly members equally. General Paul Carter was coordinating with former council commanders to build integrated defense networks. Commander Nicole Brooks was establishing intelligence sharing protocols that would benefit everyone. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy expecting to fight for their independence. Instead, they had sparked a revolution that freed dozens of species from outdated systems of control. They had proven that strength and wisdom were not opposites but complements. They had shown that the best warriors were often the ones most committed to building lasting peace. The reformed Galactic Assembly was far from perfect. There would be challenges ahead as old grievances surfaced and new disputes emerged. Some species would resist change while others pushed for reforms too quickly. Building a truly democratic galactic government would take decades or even centuries of patient work. But it was possible now in ways it had never been before. Humans had kicked open a door that the Council kept locked for millennia, and now species from across the galaxy were walking through it together. They were learning to see each other as partners rather than competitors. They were discovering that cooperation created more prosperity than domination ever could. Admiral Jacob Hayes looked around the assembly chamber one final time before departing for Earth. He had spent his entire career preparing for war, but he would be remembered for helping to build peace. That felt right somehow. Humans understood conflict better than most species, but they also understood what came after. They knew how to turn enemies into allies and how to build systems that would outlast any single generation. As his ship prepared to jump back toward human space, Jacob composed a final message to send to Earth Command. It was simple and direct, just like the response that had started everything. Mission accomplished. Humanity has its seat at the table. Now the real work begins. The message transmitted across the void toward home, and Jacob settled into his chair with quiet satisfaction. The galaxy had threatened war, and humans had replied with a question that changed everything. Now they would spend the coming years proving that their answer had been the right one all along.